What's up guys, today we're going to be going over the best weapons, loadouts, and gear to use for Vault of Glass when it returns. This is going to be stuff I'll be taking in day one. I'm sure once the contest cap is removed, the meta will change, and as we just play and figure out how things work in Destiny 2, I'm sure things will change, but this is going to be the stuff I'll be taking in day one, what I think will work the best. So first, looking at some old gameplay from Flesh, the first 3 encounters are all pretty much just ad-clear based where you have to defend objective. Starting with the entrance, you pretty much just have to stand on place. The first row encounter, you pretty much just defend confluxes, and this is by far the heaviest ad-clear section of the entire raid. Then the next encounter, which is the oracles right after this in the same area, is kind of a mix of ad-clear, then also having to shoot the oracles with long-range weapons while under light. But overall, the theme of the first 3 encounters are pretty much just ad-clear. There's no bosses in sight. There will be some high health majors here and there, and that is pretty much it. So the 2 builds I want to show off that I'll be using for these 3 encounters will first be the ultimate War My Soul build, and that is going to start off with Witherhoard. Then I'm going to use Ikelus SMG. You can really use any Seraphar Ikelus weapon you want, but I think SMG is by far the best option. Then you can use whatever legendary heavy weapon you want. I usually use a rocket with lasting impression. You can also use a sword for the Minotaurs. If you wanted more War My Souls, you could use the Seraph LMG, or even something like the Threaded Needle for more range. Then the mods of choice that will go with this build are Rage of the Warmind, Wrath of Rasputin, and Global Reach for the Holy Trinity of War My Cells. Then we have a way to become Charge of Light. I'm using Blast Radius because I'm using Witherhoard. Then finally Protective Light to use those stacks of Charge of Light to keep us alive whenever we become Red Bar. So pretty much the way this build works is the Witherhoard on its own is extremely good for ad-clear if you know where enemies are coming from, which is precisely what the Oracles and Conflicts encounter is. You pretty much know exactly where all the enemies will be coming from. It will just drop that on their spawn, swap to your Seraphar Ikelus weapon, which means not only will those weapon final blows create War My Cells, so will the Witherhoard final blows. So that is obviously one of the most efficient ways to spawn in War My Cells in the game, and by far one of the best ad-clear builds ever in Destiny 2. Then you have your heavy weapon of choice, to take out the majors, take out the oracles, or if you have a solar lasting impression rocket, for example the Kill Duello, that's also another way to create War My Cells and clear big groups at the same time. So that build is all about the most efficient ad clear you can possibly get in the game. Then to finish out that build, some things you can throw on, you could use the Overload SMG if there are champions in the raid. Then you can also use Unstoppable GL if there is Unstoppable champions in the raid. I'm not quite sure if there will be or not, but you could cover 2 of the 3 champions with that build. Then also I have the Breach and Clear mod from the Artifact, which I'll be making a video on tomorrow, breaking down exactly what this mod does. And while I think that is all around the best ad clear build in the game, I think it's also important to have 1 person, maybe even 2 on stasis. For example, with my stasis turret build, which revolves around the Bleak Watcher aspect, then also a GL of choice, for example the Salvager Salvo. And this was by far my favorite build last season, and I even use a variation of this build in GMs because it is that strong. And pretty much how it works is you need a way to become Charge of Light. So with this build, Blast Radius, and you have 4 copies of Firepower. That way every single time you throw a grenade, you get roughly like 60-65% of it back instantly. Then finish out this build, you can use whatever primary of choice depending on what champions there are. You could change that up, or if there is no champions, it's whatever you want. Then finally in your heavy slot, you can use whatever exotic you need. I'm going to probably be using Deathbringer or Lament. And the whole point of this build is you become Charge of Light, then you throw a stasis turret, and then you get like a few final blows with the salvo with demolitions on it, and you'll have your next grenade already, and before you know it, you'll just have stasis turrets all over the place. And this build is insanely strong at just controlling a room. So having 1 or maybe even 2 people on your team doing this will pretty much just freeze everything in those first 3 encounters for you, which will make it pretty much impossible to die and extremely easy to kill everything. And on top of that, if you're using Verity's Brow with this build, every single time you throw your stasis turret, you'll proc the Fill the Flames perk for all of your teammates, which will pretty much give them 1 free grenade back. So everyone will have infinite grenades, everything in the room will be frozen or slowed, and overall just having 1, maybe 2 people doing this on your fire team will be completely a game changer and just keep your fire team alive. Then after those encounters, the rest are going to be boss fights. First starting off with the Templar, which will be in the same area as the previous 2 encounters. It'll start off with ad clear, just like before, but then transition into a boss fight. Then after that, we have the Gatekeeper, which is kind of more of the same, where it's going to be kind of half ad clear, then kind of half a much shorter boss fight. Then finally we have Atheon, which once again the first half is ad clear, then boss damage. So all 3 of these boss fights are pretty heavy on ad clear first, then kind of end with the boss damage section. So looking at some builds I'll be using for these encounters, the first one will be Izanagi's Burden, because it is one of the best special weapon DPS weapons in the game, really good for just getting burst damage in. Then we'll be pairing that with a rocket launcher of choice, for example the Code de Willow or Royal Entry. You could also pair that with any other legendary as I mentioned before, but I think rockets will be the best choice. Then you can use whatever energy primary of choice, but I'm using the Icalis SMG for the Warmind cells. Then the final two mods I'll be using will be Protective Light, then also Taking Charge, which will allow me to become Charged Light by picking up orbs, and whenever I become Red Bar, I'll also get that huge damage resistance. And this DPS build will be really good for taking pop shots at a target then moving, so it could be really good for something like Gatekeeper. But what I think will be the best DPS build overall will be a Blinding GL, because as I've mentioned, all three of the boss fights are also heavy at clear, and this will help you stay alive by simply making them not be able to shoot you. Then once again, you can use whatever energy primary of choice. I'm going to be using the Icalis SMG for Warmind cells like before, and we're going to be following that up with the Deathbringer, which is the highest single weapon DPS in the game, and will be really good for pretty much all three of the bosses. And I'll be pairing this with a full-on Warmind cell build, so the three normal ones, then Warmind's Decree, and finally Fireteam Medic. You can swap out those last two ones for Protective Light and a way to become Charged Light if you want. Once again, I'm using Breach and Clear on my class item. And the reason I think this one will be extremely strong for Gatekeeper and Atheon is if you're a person that's going into the portals, pretty much what you'll do is just pop a Blinding GL the second you get in and blind everything and debuff the majors and mini bosses. And then from there you can just clear them out with your Icalis SMG, or even shoot a Deathbringer above them all, which will clear most of them and create Warmind cells. So it'll be an extremely efficient way to take out all the enemies in the portal itself and get that relic out. And then for the boss itself, you have Deathbringer, which is obviously one of the best DPS weapons in the game. Then finally, the last build you could do is Anarchy plus like a sniper or even double slug. But I don't think that's going to be the best choice for the first 24 hours under contest. This is going to be more of a meta once the contest gets lifted. And finally, looking at what you should be using for each class. If you're on Warlock and not using the Stasis Turret build, you should pretty much always be on Well Radiance plus Phoenix Protocol. That way you can pretty much just have infinite wells. If you pair that with obviously our teammates doing the same lane, you'll pretty much all have infinite wells that chain back and forth. And this will also work really well for Gatekeeper and Atheon. If you're going in the portals, just drop it down right away, clear everything out, and you'll pretty much have it almost back by the time you need to do it again. Then Hunter, for the most part, you want to be on Top Tree Tether with the new Scales Exotic, which will give you 60% more damage for 15 seconds. And overall, for both the ad clear and boss encounters, you'll be creating all kinds of orbs, debuffing all the enemies, and sharing the damage between the enemies for something like the confluxes. Then finally on Titan, for all the boss fights, you're going to want to be on Weapons of Light Bubble to give your team that 35% buff. Then you're probably going to want one person on your team using Divinity, and I think it makes a lot of sense for the Titan to use it, because if you're 100, you're going to be getting that 60% buff for your damage, so you don't want them to be doing it. So I guess Warlock could do it too, but I think it makes the most sense for the Titan to do it. And if you have multiple Titans, the rest could be using Thunder Crash with the Thunder Crash Exotic. And yeah, I think that's gonna be it for the video. Pretty much said all I want to say. I'm definitely excited for Vogue and all the Vogue weapons that are coming back. I'm sure there'll be all kinds of Vogue related content in the next week, so definitely look forward to that. Anyways, thanks for watching. Catch you guys next time.